Let's start that.
I don't know, because I'm not that far ahead. I'm just a few chapters ahead of you guys, so you're almost caught up with me at the end of each night, as I prepare the next one. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what happened last time. The big, most important event of what happened last time. Veii was besieged, 10-year war, finally captured. And the dictator who was in power when it was captured, Marcus Furius Camillus. Arguably the most important Roman we've covered so far. And we remember his tactic. He dug the mine into the side, connected with the drainage system or something like that, came out the temple of Juno. Big surprise for the Veisians. They take the town, and Veii is just ridiculously wealthy. So tons of wealth now flowing back into Rome. You remember all the Roman citizens essentially went to the city, and they went and they did the plundering together, gathered up pretty much everyone, and returning to Rome. Now remember, Camillus promised 1/10 of the plunder, 1/10 of the spoils from capturing Veii to Apollo. So now we drained our Alban Lake, very important. So we can now go take the city with Apollo basically favoring us. And now we've got to give 1/10 of the spoil back to Apollo. So says Camillus. One thing I don't feel like I did a good job really tying in. Apollo is a Greek god. They are going to send 1/10 of this spoil to some temple in the center of the Greek peninsula, Delphi. It's a ton of money. It's like, why are the Romans so connected with the Greek gods? It's because the Greek gods aren't really the Greek gods. It's just the Greeks are the powerful culture in the area, and they're the one organizing the gods into whatever pantheon. And so we call them the Greek gods, but it's really the gods of the region. And the Romans have no problem recognizing Apollo or something like Apollo. Word spreads that, hey, at this place, there's someone really good at doing prophecy. Oh, let's go to that place. It doesn't really matter that it's a Greek place. Remember, up till now, the Romans had largely relied upon the Etruscans for religious influence. And that doesn't bother them in the slightest. Something the Etruscans are good at is reading religious symbols. It's what they know how to do. So nothing strange about that. And to show you the reverence in the region for it, one of the stories I skipped over last time, when they're actually sending this tribute to Apollo, pirates capture their ship. Pirates find out, oh, this was for Apollo? They don't take the plunder, and they escort them on their way until they reach however far close to Delphi they come. And that's the pirates escorting them. That's the reverence in the region for the oracle at Delphi and what's going on there. So beyond just the Greeks, although the Greek culture leaking out everywhere. Everyone likes Greek culture. So sending back, so all the wealth came into the city. Now the Romans are going to spend that wealth like that. Why are they spending the wealth so quickly? Because they are in an extremely broke state. They have been paying for a year-round army for, 10 years now? And so they've had to pay for that. And so there's just the expense of actually having to pay for the soldiers' living. But also keep in mind, if the soldier's out there, he's not at home. And so a bunch of these guys are coming back to their homes, their farms, whatever, in disrepair. And now they got to get it back up to snuff, so to speak. And so that money is spent very quickly. And so when Camillus reminds the people, hey, we've got to send 1/10 of the plunder to Apollo, the people aren't very happy about that. So that was the first thing we talked about. There's three things Camillus did after they had their triumph back at Rome that upset the people. One of them is he had his chariot pulled by 4 white horses, something that hadn't been done since the times of the kings. 2, he reminded them, 1/10 of the plunder has to go to Apollo. So all that plunder you brought back, bring me 1/10, and we got sent to Apollo. And then the third thing was he said, it's 1/10 of the spoil has to go to Apollo, not just 1/10 of the plunder. We need to assess the value of the lands that we got and take 1/10 that value and send it on its merry way. Now that second part came up like a year after the fact. The plunder's already been spent. The Romans went through it quickly. And so there just isn't enough money in the Roman treasury and what they can tax from the people to do this thing. And so it was a bunch of matrons who just, wealthier matrons in the state, who basically donated their jewelry and stuff to make up the difference and make that payment to Apollo. So Rome's now square with Apollo, and they are very, what's the word I'm looking for? How they feel about Camillus. Resentful of Camillus. They respect him, but they're kind of resentful towards him. And now that we got Veii, what do the tribune of the plebs want? They want the land around Veii. So they're going to start pushing, once again, the agrarian law. Let's divide up public lands and make them private and sell them off to the people. That's roughly the agrarian law. Using Veii. There's tons of great things at Veii. In particular, what the plebs start pushing for is to just split Rome in half and have Veii and Rome. Let's take half the plebs, send them there, and half the patricians, send them there. And let's utilize the city that we just got. And the patricians kind of drew a line in the sand saying, not a chance. That's not going to happen. We're not going to split Rome. We're going to keep Rome together. We're not going to weaken ourselves because of a victory. That's a foolish thing to do. We're going to keep the city of Rome together. And to try and pacify the plebs, what they do is they just got some Volsci lands, and so they go and they send 3,000 settlers into the Volsci lands to help give them some land, help kind of do a small portion of the agrarian law, so to speak. Pacify. Go ahead.
Does this mean that they didn't send anyone to Veii?
Not yet. So far the Venetian lands are still just kind of sitting there. Now, part of the story that we're not really going to cover is Rome also expands to places that kind of, by extension, belong to Veii. And so there's going to be a few cities that are now understood, come under Roman rule. The logistics of how that happened, I don't know, but it's not just Veii now. There's also other towns up in the area that come under Rome as a consequence of getting Veii. So we did that. Tribune of the plebs. Okay, and so with all that, tribune of the plebs now, to try and get the agrarian law passed, what's their basic tactic? We're going to come after whoever the high-ranking patricians are to try and coerce them into agreeing with us. Otherwise, we're going to fine them and try and embarrass and humiliate them, make them less respectable amongst the plebs. And that's been their general way of trying to get what they want from the patricians. Go after whoever's seen as a top patrician, that they can generate some resentment against in the plebs. So from here on out, the tribune of the plebs are going to be working up the assembly until they feel like they have enough support that they can bring trial against Camillus. Because remember, you make your appeal to the assembly. So the majority of the assembly determines whether or not you're innocent or guilty if the offense is a big enough offense. So you basically just accuse someone of murder if you know you have the assembly on your side. Accuse them of something greater. Okay, I think that's a quick recap to where we were at. Feel like I missed anything or need to explain something better?
Do the the tribunes, like military tribunes and stuff, do they basically, not necessarily military ones, are they basically expecting to be put on trial every time?
Not right now. But we'll navigate back to that, where as magistrates leave office, tribune of the plebs will bring charges against them simply as a way of trying to push them, swing the power pendulum back towards the plebs.
What do they do with the Venetian lands then? Like,
We'll see what happens with the Venetian lands. Ultimately, they're going to end up using them. Okay, so now, tribune of the plebs, from here on out they're pushing for, we want the land of Veii to go to the plebs. That's essentially what they want. Most, in particular, they want to split Rome, because none of the lands around Veii are currently occupied. So all the plebs there would basically get lands. So they're going to start pushing for that law over and over again. That's what they're going to be after. And so what happens is the very next year, the same tribune of the plebs are re-elected. The ones that the plebs know will continue this campaign against Camillus, ultimately trying to pressure the patricians to get on board with this plan. And that's their plan. The patricians see that this is their plan. And they say, well, you can't bring trial against a magistrate. So they push for Camillus to become one of the military tribunes. So he gets elected as a military tribune. So we're 2 years after the siege of Veii now. Camillus, along with 5 other guys, are the military tribunes, so there's 6 of them. But he's one of them, so now you can't bring trial against him. He's a magistrate. Have to wait till he's out of office. So that's their way of protecting him. Now, the tribunes don't like this, because now they can't bring trial against him, and any assembly they kind of drum up against him, he'll be able to, in a professional capacity, address it and try and calm him down and try and get the plebs to see his way. And so they want him out of the city. And so we're still continuing our war. Remember, there was Veii, there was Capenna, and there was Falerii. Veii, they conquered. Capenna surrendered. Falerii, still at war with them. Now, Falerii is pretty much just fortified their position, gathered up food, and they're just ready for a siege. So they're not too worried. The tribune of the plebs, they see this as, we'll send Camillus up there. He's just going to have to siege them for the campaigning season and then come home. And so it will be a nothing burger for him, and on top of that, he'll be out of the city the whole time. So a win-win. It's a way to just stick him somewhere where he can't really do anything, and we can keep drumming up resentment against him. That's the plan. So, now they're military tribunes. It's decided that Camillus will be the one to lead the army to continue the war against Falerii up in the Etruscan lands. So that's what happens. Capenna, he gets an army, and he goes up to Falerii. And the people of Falerii are all just hiding inside their city. And so what he decides to do is to just start ravaging the lands around Falerii, whatever, trying to draw them out of their city. Now, it happened to be the case that there was like some mountainous region here on the road to Falerii that kind of makes that there's only one good path to come through. And so what Falerii decided is, we can protect more of our land if we just put up a stupid good camp right there on the road. So that there's no way for the Roman army to get through. So here's the city of Falerii, here's their camp. They build a really strong camp, so it would be just stupid for the Romans to attack this camp. Right here. And the Romans are out here ravaging the lands, but it's basically going to stop them from getting any further. Not a good way for them to do it. So the Romans get up here, they see the Falerii camp, and now they're kind of stuck. Well, a local tells them about an actually pretty easy use of road up around here that they can use to get around. And there's a hill somewhere like right here. And so what the Romans do is at night, they take that road, and then in the morning, their camp is up on this hill. Kind of a bigger hill. Their camp is up on the hill. Sorry, I have to draw small. And what Camillus does is he gets his whole army out ready to fight. So now they're all ready to just fight the Falerii if they come out of their camp. But the Falerii is still in their camp. They've got the Romans to their back, so kind of hard to get back to their city. So that's not great, but they still have a really good camp, and there's no chance of the Romans attacking that camp. With the whole army standing here, all Camillus does is he starts sending little work crews to start tearing away at their camp. If they send people out to stop the work crew, the army can attack them. The only way to stop it completely would be for Falerii to send out their entire army. Otherwise, they just get overrun with whoever they try to send out there to stop the progress from the work crews. And they don't want to send out their whole army and fight the Romans. The whole point is to avoid that. And so in them debating what they're going to do, the leaders of the Falerii camp, as they're debating and the camp is slowly being torn apart by the Romans, the people in the camp just start panicking. And it starts out as a trickle, some of them just running back to the city. And it turns out to an all-out rout, with them just abandoning their camp, running back to their city, because they're not waiting to see whatever their commander is going to tell them to do next. And so a bunch of them get killed in the process. They suffer a massive defeat, but they get back in their city. So Falerii lost a huge portion of their army, lost their camp, so lots of plunder for the Romans. So now it was at least worth his time to go up there for Camillus. Because ravaging the lands, I mean, that had already been done tons of time. That wasn't going to do much. But getting their camp, that's a big deal. So that was really nice. Now, he tells his soldiers, none of that's yours. That's all going to the quaestors to help refill Rome's treasury. So Roman soldiers, not too happy about that. And then he besieges the city the way we know and love. Now, the problem with besieging the city is we're not doing year-round sieges anymore. If Falerii can just live out the siege, we can't starve them out. We're kind of dead in the water. Unless we can somehow overpower the city. So while he's besieging the town, there is a tutor in the city of Falerii. A tutor to noble youths. It's his job to educate them, like 20 of them or however many. And so it's very normal that he takes them out to like go horseback riding and stuff like that, explore the countryside as part of their education. What he does is he takes the youths out and tricks them into going into the Roman camp.
Tricks the youths?
The youths. So he's a tutor for Falerii nobles. He teaches their kids. And he just takes them out and educates them. And so taking them out of the city is a very normal thing.
Wow.
So he takes all the kids that he's responsible for out of the city and tricks them into going into the Roman camp.
What?
Why?
Because now he's telling the Romans, you can use these youths as negotiating leverage to get the city to surrender to you, hoping that he's going to get some kind of reward from the Romans.
Jeez.
Now Camillus is furious at him. He says, these men are of the age that were we to take the city, we wouldn't exert any violence against them. And so, what he does is he has the tutor stripped naked. He gives all the young men, explains to them what their tutor was going to do to him, and gives them all rods. And tells the kids to beat him back into the city and tell the nobles what happened.
That's crazy.
And so, a bunch of teenage boys beating this poor tutor who tried selling him into slavery or whatever, back into the city of Falerii to be dealt with however they see fit. Now, I don't know if Falerii knew that the Romans couldn't hold out a winter siege anymore. Those days were done and gone. They weren't going to do that anymore. But with that happening, Falerii decides it's a good time to surrender. They see that as the Romans showing goodwill towards them, and so they think that they're actually okay becoming a Roman ally. And so with that event, the Falerii surrenders to him, turns the city over to him, and there's pretty much three things that they're now required to do. One, you can't arm yourself anymore, so you have to turn over your arms. Two, you have to pay tribute, which is just pay the salaries of all the soldiers I had to bring to take the city. And then three, you're just under your Roman ally now. So from here on out, Rome is responsible for your defense. You are not allowed to defend yourself. If an army's coming to attack you, it's now Rome's responsibility to come defend you, just like it was for Tusculum or any other Latin or Hernici city. So they're now going to become a Roman ally. Last thing they're required to do is give up some hostages to the city of Rome. That's just to make sure you don't backtrack on your treaty. So you violate the treaty, the hostages get killed, or something to that effect. So hostages, give up arms, and then pay the tribute, pay the soldier salary, and then that's it. So the soldiers get their salary, but remember, they didn't get any of the plunder from that camp. So now they're coming back home, won a great victory. No one thought that they were going to get Falerii. It was supposed to be just go sit in the field and wait for a few months and then come home. So they come back with this big victory, but the soldiers didn't get any of the plunder, and they're a bunch of plebs. So once again, the plebs admire Camillus. They think he's a great leader, great general. They're glad he's on their side, but they also hate him. Feel like he's depriving them of what belongs to them. So Camillus, once again, great victory, becoming more resented and hated by the plebs. And back at Rome. So had a very successful, that's his fourth time as a military tribune. So he's been military tribune 4 times and dictator once. Any questions so far? Remember, I probably should have showed you where Falerii was once again. Falerii, that was up here. Rome v. Falerii. Just give you a sense of where we're talking about. Okay, so now, following up here, continuing, business as normal. Every time tribunes are out there campaigning to get elected, tribunes of the plebs, not military tribunes, tribunes of the plebs. Every time tribunes of the plebs are out there pushing to get elected, out campaigning to get elected, what they're campaigning on is I'll be the one to help get the agrarian law passed. And it's understood in this context what it means is the move to Veii done, and get us moving to Veii and get us access to all these great lands. The Senate, as one of the things to try and counter out any sort of plebeian power, is they go back to appointing consuls whenever they can. So for the past 15 years straight, we've had nothing but military tribunes. Huge difference between military tribunes, the two big differences.
Plebeians can be them.
A pleb can become a military tribune, and then military tribunes there can be multiple. Consuls there can only ever be two. So we'll still see military tribunes come up, typically in times of expected war or in times of plague when it's expected a few of them might go out of office for whatever reason. Outside of that, the Senate's going to be pushing to go back to consuls as normal to try and help maintain that balance of power so that the agrarian law doesn't get pushed through.
I'm confused. You said elected to push for the agrarian law, parentheses, move to V. Is the agrarian law to move to V?
No, moving to V would do a lot to fulfill the agrarian law. In its most general context, the agrarian law is make all public lands private and give it to private citizens. That's essentially what it is, because a bunch of public lands are being occupied by the wealthier people, in particular the patricians. And so what often ends up happening when Rome gets access to a bunch of new lands, people who can just start going out and occupying the land and start putting it to use. Which the plebs hate, because when the time comes to actually do something with it, they've already occupied a bunch of the lands.
Yeah.
The poorer plebs. So
So I thought the agrarian law was more specific to the land or land Rome, but I can see it's really just anywhere.
it has to do with public lands in general being converted to private lands. That's what it is in its most general form. Specific cases of the agrarian law will be specific things like move to V and split the population. Okay. Now, with Camillus, even though he went and had that great success, now he's leaving office. He's now, once again, someone we can bring trial against. And so the tribunes are now going to bring, no, that's not happening yet. Oh, I think this is the same year. Sorry, same year still. This is what's going on in Rome while he's gone. Okay, I think this is still same year. But another thing tribunes start to do that is completely unprecedented up till now is not only were they bringing trials against magistrates as they left office, they start bringing trials against other tribunes of the plebs who weren't supportive of this law. Now, it's much harder for a tribune of the plebs to break the law because all they can do is veto and say no. There's almost no real restrictions on them. How do they break the law? With the magistrates, it's very clear. You say that you have this responsibility in some way you had gross misconduct. You know, if you're the head of an army and the army suffers a huge disaster, you can bring trial against the guy who was supposed to lead that army. The tribune of the plebs don't really have responsibilities like that. They just say no. And so it's shocking how you could bring any trial against them. And yet they do bring trial against. There's going to be a few tribune of the plebs who get there with patrician support. The ones who have patrician support and aren't completely on board with this agrarian law, they start bringing trial against them as they leave office. And so they bring trial against them and end up being successful, charging them with crimes that they're obviously innocent of and having them pay fines. And so this is just what was completely shocking. So Camillus, seeing this happens, he's mind blown by this. It's obvious what you guys are doing is wrong. So he warns that if the tribunes continue to abuse their power this way, then the patricians are going to be forced to act. And he makes reference back to, remember the last time patricians had to rein you in? Which was the tribune of the plebs who went crazy got assassinated, trying to bring trial against people. So he kind of hints at that just a little bit, saying it's dangerous when this has to happen. You need to rein yourself in before the patricians are the ones that have to do it. And then he turns around and he gets after the consuls. So I guess this was the next year. 2 consuls in power now. He's getting after them for letting this trial go forward, because it was obvious that the man was innocent. And then he gets after the assembly, because remember, the assembly had to vote him to be guilty. And they voted him to be guilty even though they knew he's completely innocent. You just vote him to be guilty because you don't like what he did, not because he's actually guilty of anything. This is not the way it's supposed to work. And so everyone kind of has to admit that he's right. They all feel a little bit worse after he talks to him, feel a little bit shameful. But at the same time, they kind of hate him a little bit more too. And so he's drumming up this hatred against them, more and more. And so, all that being said, the tribunes decide, they think they have enough support, that they're just going to push forward with the law. Remember that tribunes can now offer up a law to the assembly. And so even though there's been all this pushback against it, they decide we're going to offer it up to the assembly anyways, and just let them vote on it. So they get the assembly together, and they actually have them come together to vote on this law. And now the patricians have to convince the plebs not to vote for this law. And they make all sorts of arguments against them, mostly making religious arguments and patriotic arguments. But one of the biggest arguments that they bring against them is they say, look how divided we already are together in one city, and how often it comes to the patricians versus the plebs. How much more disunity would there be if we split into two cities? And how long would we actually function as two cities coming under one government? How long would it be before it was two completely separate cities functioning against each other? And it'd basically be like reverting to what it was when there was Rome and there was Veii there again. Be like undoing the entire war effort. So that's a major argument that they're putting forward, is that we are already too politically fractured. Doing this pretty much seals our fate. It's a terrible idea. And they vote. The vote is extremely close, but it comes down on the side of we're going to stay at Rome. And we're not going to send half our population to Veii. For whatever reason, they did this vote by tribe. And so it came down to, there's 21 tribes at the time, 11 to stay, 10 to go. So that's how the vote came down. Very close. Yeah. One tribe's vote could have changed a lot. Now, because of how close that was, the Senate is a bit terrified. And what they decide to do is taking the lands now around Veii, not in Veii itself, but around Veii, they start offering it up to every male citizen has access now to 7 acres of land in that area. So everyone's getting a bunch of the lands around Veii now. And I don't know if there's some restriction on if you already had lands, you didn't qualify or whatever, but 7 acres of land, pretty close nearby, a few miles away from Rome. Hopefully that settles it for a while. Very terrified about how close the vote came. And yeah, Rome's going to continue now in the process of electing consuls when they can, with exceptions when there's a lot of war or when plague occurs. The following year, plague occurs, so they elect military tribunes just so that there can be at least 2 people functioning in the office. It's largely an irrelevant year, except for that there's plague. Some people die, but not much happens due to the plague. So it must have been more of a region-wide plague than just a Rome plague. But then after that, back to consuls. So now, 392, we're 4 years after Veii's been taken. And now, finally, the tribunes, having failed to get the agrarian law, the move to Veii law passed, they renew their efforts against Camillus. Once again, why Camillus? Because there's resentment against him, and he's seen as the highest of the patricians right now. If you're going to bring down the patricians, hard to find a better candidate than Camillus. And so, they finally do bring a trial against him. They feel like they got enough resentment against him. The plague's now passed, so people can actually show up in the assembly, get enough votes for everything. And what they're basically charging him is that he somehow mishandled the plunder from Veii. Like he was somehow pushing for too much to be taken or something like that. Not sure exactly the specifics. That's as much as Livy gives us. But something about mishandling the plunder from Veii is what he's being put on charge of. Now, even though there is a bunch of resentment against Camillus, Camillus has some amazing achievements, and there's a bunch of love for Camillus in the city as well. So he's a very politically dividing figure. A lot of resentment against him, but also a lot of love for him. It's kind of understood that when this trial is coming against him, that it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to be found guilty and he's going to be fined. It's kind of understood. And so the people who love him, a bunch of Romans, they come to him saying, this is completely unjust. There's no way for us to stop this trial coming against you. There's no way that we can stop your guilty verdict. But what we all promise to do is whatever fine you are charged with, we will be the ones to come and pay the fine for you so that you don't have to pay that fine. Now, Camillus, in the last plague, he lost his son. He'd lost his other family prior to that, but now he'd lost his son. At this point, he's something like, I think he just hit 60 years old.
So this is his second family, and he lost him too.
He lost his son, and I think he lost other members of his family prior to that. His son was the last member of his family alive.
Okay, that makes sense.
So his son died in the plague, lost other members of his family earlier throughout his life. City resents him, bringing this trial against him. He knows he's going to be found guilty. He decides there's not much of a reason for me to stay in Rome anymore. And so he decides to just leave the city prior to the trial even being carried out and exile himself. And he goes to Ardea. Now, why is that always a completely safe thing to do? Because the tribunes of the plebs have no power outside of Rome. You can always avoid a trial by willing to just exile yourself from the city, and then there's nothing they can do. So that's why that's frequently something that happens when someone knows a trial is coming against them.
And Ardea is just the best place.
And Ardea, he just already had good connections. It's understood that the Roman nobles have good connections with Roman nobles in Ardea. Remember, Ardea was the one who had the lands kind of unjustly taken from them, and the patricians had to trick the plebs into basically giving those lands back to Ardea. And Ardea was also the one with the pretty young girl who had a commoner boy after her and a noble boy after her, and Rome came, stepped in, took care of things. So that's the city of Ardea. Good relationships with Rome, in particular, good relationships between the two noble classes of the city. So Camillus there would have good friends there, be well taken care of. So he goes to Ardea. Prior to his trial even happening. Now, as he's leaving the city, he offers up a prayer to the gods, saying that if that outrage was done to him without his deserving it, they, meaning Rome, or at least the plebs, would at the earliest opportunity give cause to his ungrateful country to regret his absence. Oh, they is the gods. They, the gods, at the earliest opportunity would give cause to his ungrateful country, the Romans, to regret his absence. Now, in other words, if I am being treated unjust in the eyes of the gods, because I'm basically being accused of not handling this plunder right, if in fact I did not do this thing right, let me be punished. If I did do it right, and I'm innocent, let Rome be punished, as his prayer as he's leaving the city to Ardea.
Does Livy mention how he knows that?
He's just collecting whatever the records are that he has. He doesn't mention where each record came from. No.
It's just that's an interesting thing to have in
It's a good piece of foreshadowing.
Oh, he has tons. I only give you guys a little bit of it, but he has tons of what are supposed to be recreated speeches. That's something that seems to be captured a lot, and I mean, if studying rhetoric, if you're in a city where your political career largely relies upon your ability to deliver a public speech, a common thing that would happen is people's speeches were written down, and you would practice rehearsing those speeches, memorizing those speeches, as practice for public speaking. And so recording and memorizing speeches was a normal part of early education. Now, I don't know about the Romans at this time in particular. I do know it's a very common thing with the Greeks at the same time frame. So that wouldn't be too unusual that portions of a speech were preserved in history. Or probably somewhat reconstructed with time, I'm sure, but yeah.
So like, someone either had to have heard him say it, or he had to tell someone that that's what he said. Yeah.
Right.
something like that.
Yeah, I doubt he's leaving the city by himself. I'm sure he has followers, his whatever.
That makes
Welcome
sense.
How long if he's praying, it would be in a temple with an audience?
Probably. No idea where the prayer even occurred.
Yeah. I don't know if prayers are actually supposed to be silent. Culture,
Yeah, that might be a cultural thing.
Treacherous.
Anyways, even with him out of the city, they continue the trial, and as anticipated, he's fined 15,000 asses, and the poor people who supported him paid the fine even though he's left the city. But there goes Camillus.
He did leave.
Yeah.
So he technically didn't have to leave at all.
No, he didn't have to leave.
There's nothing he gained from leaving.
He just,
He lost
Rome didn't want him there anymore, and he didn't feel like he really had a reason to stay.
Okay. Other than that.
Other than to try and be a good leader to Rome. Any other questions?
Comes back, right?
Camillus? Yes, he comes back. We have a lot more to say about Camillus in the latter stage of his life.
I did a little bit of research, and I should already know this because I knew Switzerland was on the west.
Switzerland's right here.
That's all that mountainside is Switzerland, and then a little bit of the northern plains, and then the right side, I want to say is
Austria.
Austria, yeah. So, anyways, just interesting. Switzerland and Austria is that mountain range.
Yeah. Okay. So talking now about this mountain range a little bit. Should have done this when we talked about the Gauls. I feel like it's an important thing to cover. These are the Alps. We're looking at the northern end of the Italian peninsula. So this is the northern end of the Etruscan territory. Rome, probably somewhere like right there, way north of Rome. Just wanted to give you a sense for these mountains to the north and how it was that the Gauls didn't really come into contact with the Etruscans for so long, and it was these Appalachian mountains in between. Now that's just Appalachians. Don't let me say that. Alps. Appalachians, eastern United States. Alps, northern Italy. Very different things, except for to a dyslexic brain. Okay, Alps. That's what these are. Alps. Okay. Here's a better map. I just thought that one looked cool. Here's one showing you the elevations to understand just how insane these mountains are. So here we are showing the different elevations. Notice that it's going down to basically sea level. So this whole plain where the Po River is really close to sea level. In between these Alps, notice how there's valleys that get clear down into the green. So it is shooting from 2.5 miles above sea level to a couple hundred meters above sea level. So not only are the Alps just kind of like a short, thick mountain range, they also are just incredibly steep, jumping up and down. I mean, I think technically the Rocky Mountains has taller mountains than the Alps, but the base of those mountains isn't close to sea level. And so it is just shooting up and down in very short distances. So incredibly difficult to cross these mountain range. And where the Gauls are supposed to have come through, roughly in that same area, I think the Romans, I don't know, making up a road. Here it is. Okay.
Do we actually know when?
Not close to the road. Well, eventually a road was made by the Roman Empire through roughly the same region that the Gauls would have taken. And if I can remember off the top of my head, that road getting all the way through the Alps was something like 60 miles long. So it would be 60 miles of just crossing mountains to work your way through them. Just absolutely insane.
I imagine you can only do it in summer.
I would imagine. Unless you're a madman named Hannibal. Yeah, so crossing through there, absolutely insane that they did that. And then you can see how they naturally kind of just took over this land when they came across. Because it's all kind of the same, and the Etruscan land kind of fell back to these mountains. And I don't know how hard those mountains are to cross. We know that when Julius Caesar was coming from Gaul, he crossed the Rubicon. So whatever his path would have been, for whatever reason, it comes clear over here rather than cutting this way. So I don't know if that's the most natural path or whatever. This is Rubicon right here. So probably a bit of difficulty crossing those as well, making it somewhat natural border between the Etruscans and the Gauls.
Where are we going to be on that map? Okay.
This side of this peninsula, probably, I don't know how many miles in, 15 miles inland, something like that. Maybe not that much, maybe more like 10.
I would say he was just trying to avoid most of the mountain.
Maybe, right, but I'm just saying, if that was his most natural path, or maybe there's a reason he was going that way. Don't know the details off the top of my head, but. Anyways, so there's the Alps, and that gives you a sense for some of the geography of northern Italy, and how much of just a natural barrier the Alps are. Insanely good barrier.
I did not know that.
Okay, any questions about the mountains? Any questions about the Appalachians? Nice little, probably a good example of a short, long mountain range, opposite of the Alps. Being tall and compact. Okay, anyways, so now the Gauls. So the Gauls, they're moving into northern Italy. They've been in conflict with the Etruscans. And now they're pushing down into northern Italy, more into the Etruscan lands. And so it's getting to the point where they're coming into conflict with Clusium. Now, Clusium, going all the way back, that's where Porsenna was from. good friend of Rome. Rome's been on good terms with them. Porcena, that was clear back in 408 BC. So we're at 391 BC. Rome has been good friends with them for almost 120 years.
508.
I have no clue why I said it. But roughly 120 years difference there. That part's true. Okay. So, that's the Clusium that we're talking about. So, as the Gauls are coming into contact with Clusium, Clusium is going to try and negotiate with the Gauls. Negotiate some sort of deal with them. They want the Romans to be present for those negotiations. And so they asked the Romans to be present for those negotiations. I think they were actually trying to get the Romans to send up an army to help them in case. Rome says, we'll send up 3 ambassadors to represent us. And so they just send 3 ambassadors up to Clusium to be part of this conference, speaking with the Gauls. All 3 of them sent happen to be Fabians. That's the same Fabii family, the 306 Fabians who took on the war with Veii themselves. Those Fabians, that Fabian family. Anyway, oh, go ahead.
Didn't one of them survive?
One of them survived and started the Fabians all over again. No, that they all died. It was all the men of military age died, with one staying behind.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, and so they're doing this negotiation. They're sitting in with this negotiation, and the Gauls pretty much are telling Clusium, you've got to turn over to us this much of your land if you don't want to have war. If you're not willing to turn over this much of your land, it's going to come to war. And they're being a bit outrageous in their demands is the vibe that you get from reading it. And so Clusium, trying to somehow talk him down to something else, Gauls are refusing to come down. The Romans are kind of shocked that they're asking such a big demand of Clusium just to avoid war. And so they ask the Gauls roughly by what right do you think you can just come in here and demand this much land? The Gauls' response, we carry our right in our swords. All things are the property of the brave. Who does that belong to? The person who's willing to fight the hardest to keep it. That's who it belongs to. And if I can beat you for it, then it's mine. Tough. It's the natural order of things. Remember, for the Gauls, they raise the warriors up in their society. Who's the best man? The best warrior. Same question. So, give you a sense for the Gauls. Now, things get so heated between the Gauls and the Clusiums, and even some of the Roman ambassadors, that it ends up going to war. We're going to fight. And so they decide they're going to fight it. The 3 Fabians that were there were so worked up by this, they decided to participate in the fight on the side of Clusium. Now, this is a big, big no-no. Ambassadors do not get to get involved in these conflicts if you're there in an ambassador capacity. So this is a big, big no-no. Now, how would the Gauls even know? Well, they wouldn't have known, except for one of the Fabians happened to kill one of the Gallic chieftains in the fight.
This is just like a brawl?
There are 2 interpretations. One of them is it's a brawl that breaks out between whoever was there. One of them is it's an actual formal fight, and I cannot figure out which way it went. I think the way Livy is trying to present it is as a formal fight, because he talks about a surrender. So I think that they actually just leave hot-headed, and the next day or whatever, organize their fight and come to fighting that way.
How many people were involved?
Don't have any numbers. Why the Gauls came to Clusium in the first place? There's a natural answer of, well, they were just expanding into territory and it seemed like a good place to do it. One of the reasons given up is access to wine, in particular. Nice fruits from down south, but in particular wine, and they wanted better access to wine. And then there's one more story that Livy is unsure is true, but nonetheless was a popular story at the time. Here's a popular story for how the Gauls came to Clusium. The story goes that the king of Clusium died. His right-hand man was a man by the name of Arens. So Arens is now the de facto king, while the king's son is coming of age. So the king ends up with like a 14-year-old son who's not quite ready to come of age when he dies. So Arens is now the one raising basically this kid up to the next kingship, running things while he's doing it. Eventually, he raises up the king, and there he is, now he's a king. Well, the king seduces Aaron's wife.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so the kid he basically raised ends up seducing his wife. So Aaron becomes furious after that. And he knows about the Gauls up north, and so he goes up north, and he tries talking the Gauls into coming down and invading Clusium to come and take the land, promising them some amount of land in return. And wine. So that's the popular story. But for whatever reason, they definitely do come down into Clusium. There's definitely some sort of conflict that occurs. The Romans participated when they shouldn't have, big no-no. In the actual fighting, one of the Roman ambassadors kills a Gaul chieftain. Now remember, your chieftains are like your big shot warriors. And a Roman killed one. That is significant. And so the Gauls are going to want to know who that guy was. And they realize, oh, that was a Roman ambassador. What is he doing in the fight? And so when the Gauls find out that a Roman is participating in the fight, they call back their troops. And that puts an end to the fighting pattern. They're trying to figure out what's going on. Did Rome send up an army? Or was this really just one of those ambassadors? They find out it was just a Roman ambassador participating in the fight, which makes the Gauls outraged. You don't do that. It's like breaking international law, so to speak. And so Gauls, in their outrage, they decide to send some ambassadors down to Rome. Now this is going to take several weeks, negotiations, whatever, send the ambassadors down to Rome. By the time the Gaul ambassadors get down to Rome, the Fabians are already back at Rome saying whatever happened. When the Gauls get to Rome, the ambassadors say, we demand that you hand over the 3 Fabians who participated in this fight against us. Otherwise, we will declare war against you. Now, the patricians and the Senate, they know that they should do that. But they don't want to do that. It's the Fabian family. This is an important patrician family. They don't want to send 3 Fabians up to be killed by the Gauls. And so rather than doing what they feel like they should, they instead put the vote to the assembly, knowing that the assembly is going to vote, no, we keep Roman citizens. And so the assembly votes, no, we're going to keep the Roman citizens, Gauls, you don't get them. And so the 3 ambassadors go back up, and they tell the Gauls, they refused us, basically. And so with that, the Gauls are outraged, and they decide, we'll put a pin in Clusium for a while, we're going to march on Rome. Furious about this. And so, Gauls start marching towards Rome. To add insult to injury, the upcoming year takes time to do things. The very 3 Fabians are made military tribunes. For the assembly to shove it in the Gauls' face that we are not going to hand them over to you. And so the Gauls are particularly enraged by that. Not only did you not punish these guys who violated international law, you rewarded these guys who violated international law. So they're particularly angry about that. And now we've got the army coming down. Rome knows the army's coming down. So Rome, they do their normal army, they levy their normal troops, and they're going to send them out to go fight the Gauls. Now the Gauls move way quicker through the territory than anticipated. It's shocking how fast these guys are moving through the territory. One of the ways that they're moving through the territory, down through the Etruscan territory, down towards Rome so quickly, is they are making it very clear that they are headed for Rome and want to avoid any other conflict outside that. Now, what are the few things we remember about the Gauls? They're massive, so very intimidating, great warriors, and then kind of simple outside of that, outside of metalworking.
Barbaric, probably.
Barbaric, sure.
That's what the Romans would say.
But so one of the reasons that Romans march so slowly is your Roman is typically carrying like 60 pounds of materials. And a huge portion of that material is for setting up the Roman camp. I don't know, I don't think we've ever really talked much about the Roman camp when they actually set it up. So when the Romans actually set up their camp, what they do is they have 2 roads going through the center of their camp. They have their most important general camps, whatever, down in the middle. There's their camps. And then you split up a bunch of tents over here, a bunch of tents over here, a bunch of tents over here, a bunch of tents over here. And then you would build your wall, sticking your pylons into the ground all the way around here. So this would be your standard, you dig, let's see, so viewing it this way, you would dig your trench in the ground, make a hill, and then stick your pylons up, aiming out that way. So you have actual wall all the way down here. They had actual gates built in where the roads are. And then in all 4 corners, they would build actual watchtowers for people to be up in. So it's a full-fledged camp. There's gates, there's walls, there's towers. It's not easy to just break into one of these camps, and these camps are very defensive positions. It's easy to hold out a camp against people. The Gauls don't have this. So they're not lugging around 60 pounds of material. I mean, they still got to carry whatever they're going to sleep in and stuff like that, but they're not hauling just a ton of lumber to quickly set up these camps. That's a huge part of what your pack is as a Roman soldier.
How the lumber? I assume they just gathered that.
No, lumber.
What?
Huge part of it is just hauling around the actual lumber so you can hurry up and throw these things together. These pre-cut things ready to be assembled.
All right then.
So it is just a ton of wood is a huge part of what they're hauling around.
This whole time I thought they were just gathering it from the local.
Now, going back to Camillus, one of the things he required his soldiers to do was don't bother about typical Roman luggage and double up how much wood you're hauling, because they had to do an extra big wall when they besieged whoever it was. And so hurry up, prepare them, and get marching. So that's one of the reasons that these Gauls march so stupid quickly, is they're also reckless in the Roman view, kind of recklessly moving through the territory. And so the Romans are completely caught off guard by how quickly the Gauls suddenly move. It's why the Romans only march, I can't remember what we came across, I think we looked up once, and it was like 10 miles a day.
Something like that.
Something like that for the Romans. For the Gauls, I have no clue how many miles they were going today. But from the resources we have, it sounds like a lot more than just 10. Okay, and so the Romans, they take their army and they find the Gallic army way further down south than they expected, just north of Falerii by the time they run into contact with them. So you got the Romans being headed up by the 3 Fabii. They also had 3 other military tribunes participating in it. And then the Gauls, their leader now is Brennus. The Gauls are a confederation of chieftains. He's going to be the chieftain representing the confederation, the one that they're all going to come under. And going to go through the details of the battle, where they go meet here in a sec. Did you have any questions leading up to the battle?
You told us what the confederation, can you remind me again?
Confederation is where participation is optional. A federation is where it's mandatory. We have a federal system in the United States. A state cannot just choose to leave the Union and function as its own independent state. Okay, so we're ready now for Battle of the Allia, which happens July 18th, 390 BC. Got the date on it, down to that specific. It's that ingrained into Roman memory. Now, numbers for the battle. Numbers are all over the place. The Romans had around 24,000. The Gauls had around 40,000. Now, I'll tell you some of the different estimates. One of the estimates is that the Romans had 12,000 and the Gauls had 30,000. One of the estimates is the Romans had 24,000 and the Gauls had 40,000. One of the estimates is that the Romans had 35,000 and the Gauls had 70,000.
That's true.
Livy himself does not give any particular numbers to the battle. All he does is makes it very clear. All he says is that Romans levied the normal number of troops, whatever that would mean for the time, and that the Gauls drastically outnumbered them. So that's all we get from Livy. So I just picked some numbers because I'm going to give you something. So here's exactly what they were, 24,000 and 40,000. Perfect, counted them myself.
Nice.
Now, when the Romans, so here's where they're marching up from Rome, and we're just north of Falerii here. This is going to give us a view of the battlefield. So here's Falerii. Here's the Camillus River. And then the Allia is just a small little stream running into the Tiber. Now I'm going to draw a simpler version over here just to talk about the details of the battle, because that one doesn't do a very good job. But they have a better picture of what it looks like. So here's our Tiber River. Perfect drawing. And then the Allia somewhere over here, washing into the Tiber River. And then over here, a hill. When the Romans show up, the Gauls are already lined up for it. just one big massive line right there with another group of troops on this side of the hill. Actually, the Romans lined up first, sorry. The Romans lining up first. They set up, they do thick number of troops at the wings, very skinny in the middle, only a few lines deep, and then thick again at the edge. And then they put a bunch on the hill to act as their reserves to support wherever they needed here.
Is that usual? To do skinny in the center like that?
It's been done before. There's a few times where people do it and it works. There's a few times where people do it and it doesn't work. But it's been done before. So he's trying to support the wings so that they can't get flanked and hold out in the middle. Once Brandon sees that, he just lines up his men, whatever, way thicker than what they have. He sees these guys on the hill over here. He thinks that the plan with them is to, when we engage, to try and attack from behind. So Brandon takes his elite troops, biggest, strongest, meanest guys, sets them aside, and he's going to have them charge up the hill at the reserves. Now this is the Romans' first time coming into contact with the Gauls. And so when the Gauls just charge at them, over here on the left, they almost instantly collapse and give up and run away. Immediate panic. On the right side, they end up holding up for a while, and then end up giving up and running away. On the right side is where they take the most casualties, because that's where they hold out the most. Once these guys start running away and fleeing, then the army kind of just turns towards them. So they take the heaviest losses and flee. Now the directions that they flee is where this one is more useful to us. Everyone on the left, these guys all flee across the Tiber, and they run off to Veii. So they're somewhere up here. They run across the Tiber and they run off to Veii. It's only the reserves here who took the heaviest losses who actually run back to Rome, past Fidene, rather than going to Veii. And so, if we say there were 24,000, making it up, but give you a story, what ended up happening is a couple thousand of them died, a couple thousand went back to Rome, and about 20,000 went to Veii. So a huge bulk of the army and the portion that took the least losses went to Veii. The small portion that took the most losses went back to Rome.
Miscommunication, likely.
Not sure how much of it was miscommunication. One of the things that could have happened is whatever military tribunes were on this side quickly got killed, and that led to the collapse.
No, what I mean is that when they get back to Rome, they're going to assume
Oh yeah, there's going to be a lot of miscommunication. Of the ones who went to Veii, the guy who ends up taking charge is just a centurion. So whatever the higher ranking officers were that were leading this are no longer there for whatever reason. And we don't have that much detail as to whatever happened to the military tribunes who were supposed to be leading them. So yes, small portion gets back to Rome, bulk of the army gets back to Veii. Quick retreat, huge humiliation for the Romans. The Gauls are shocked. They can't believe that this is happening. When the Romans retreat this quickly, they are convinced that this has got to be a trick, and that they're trying to get us to go into some sort of position so that they can turn around and fight us again. Because they assumed the Romans were great fighters, and that's the reason that they were invited as ambassadors at Clusium. On top of that, they watched a Roman ambassador was one of the people who killed one of their chieftains. So up till now, they had very high expectations for the Romans, and then just like that, the Romans are fleeing the battlefield. So the Gauls kind of dragged their feet, not really doing anything for a while, shocked at what just happened. And then they have rituals about burying their dead before they move forward. So the Gauls kind of drag their feet here on the battlefield before moving forward to Rome. So they're going to show up a while later. The Romans are going to get back to Rome much faster than the Gallic army shows up at Rome.
It's amazing how much they won, even though there was constant misinterpretation of what was going on.
Now, with the soldiers who get back to Rome, like Parley said, they are going to start telling the story of what just happened. And what just happened is they just got destroyed. As far as they know, They were the part of the army that held out the longest, and they took massive losses. If you think it was like 4,000 there, maybe 2,000 would have died, half of them died, and they're the ones who did the best. So they think the other portion of the army has just been obliterated. They're gone. They don't exist anymore. The Gauls killed them all. So, the soldiers at Veii, they didn't send any message back to Rome letting them know here's where we are. It took them a sec to get organized again because they didn't have leadership. So no message comes to Rome letting them know that the majority of their army's there. And so they're presumed dead. And so now we just have these Romans here. On top of that, the soldiers that ran back, they dropped their arms when they retreated. And so they're coming back without really any military equipment. And so they're going to have to be rearmed with whatever the city has available to them to hurry up and get ready for the Gauls that are coming. So very small portion, maybe a couple thousand men. And we got to hurry up and rearm these men for the upcoming Gauls. They're so panicked, they go straight to the Citadel of Rome. There are not enough soldiers in arms to maintain a perimeter around Rome anymore. It's understood that the Gauls are coming and that they're going to get attacked. We don't have enough people to hold them out at the city walls. We may as well consolidate into the Citadel right now. So Rome is panicking. All the soldiers and all military-aged men are being sent to the Citadel. That's where you're all going to go. Being ready to hold out for the siege that they expect is going to be coming. The Gauls, it takes them all day to finally end up showing up, so they're not going to show up till sunset. So the Romans are going to have a bit of time to mobilize and get things in action while the Gauls are dragging their feet doing the things that they're doing. So Rome, first thing they're doing, get all the resources, all the food we can to the Citadel, and all military-aged men to the Citadel. That's the first thing that they're going to do. Second thing that they're going to do is have all the citizens who can flee the city. Everyone else, you've got to get out of the city right now. They're worried about all their religious artifacts. A bunch of your wealth is going to be in the different religious artifacts that you have in your different temples. What they're going to do there is have all their religious officials gather up all those things and go to the Etruscan city of Caere. That's one just up to the northwest of them. So that's where all the religious stuff is going to go, expecting that the Etruscans are going to be very respectful of those types of things and not try to rob them or anything like that. And so that's where they're going to send it. Unfortunately, a bunch of plebs decide it's not worth fleeing the city. They decide that they're going to just keep their stuff here locally and just try and board up their little houses and barricade their houses so that no Gauls can get in. That's not going to work well for them. The people who it's understood can't evacuate the city, your very elderly people or your very sick people, since they don't have time to evacuate, what's decided is that every past consul who served in Rome is going to stay with those people and is going to die with them. And that's what's understood. Remember how the patricians view themselves. They are the father to the plebs. And so for them to leave these plebs who can't defend themselves at this time, leave them to die and not die with them, it would be like a father abandoning his children to death rather than staying there and dying with them. And so they're going to go and they're going to be with the plebs. All the past consuls are going to be with the ones who couldn't evacuate the city. Now, all the older patricians who decide that they are not any use fighting, they're too old to fight, what they decide to do is that they are going to open up the doors to their homes so that the Gauls can easily get access. They're going to dress in their finest clothes. Sorry, I said patricians, I meant past magistrates. So all the people who at some point had held a magistracy in Rome, held some official position in Rome, they're going to go dress up in the clothes of that position, the highest honors they ever attained, the ones who are too old to fight, too weak to fight, however they make that judgment. They're going to go sit in front of their homes in their fine ivory chair with their homes completely open to the Gauls. Sit there all dressed up and just wait for the Gauls out in front of them. And the attitude there is more like a captain should go down with his ship. They represent the city. They've been officials in the city. If Rome's going down, we're going to go down with her. And we're not going to eat up resources in the Citadel because already that's going to be maxed out. So as much food as we can to the Citadel, fighting age men that we can to the Citadel, citizens who can flee the city, past magistrates sitting out in front of their homes, past consuls with those who couldn't flee the city. And that's kind of how they're organizing themselves. Now, the Fabians, they feel an extra level of guilt because it was 3 of their clan who led to this whole thing happening. Remember, at Rome, we've got the Tiber River coming past. You have Rome over here, and then there's a Janiculum over here, the hill over there with the fortress on it. What the Fabians decide they're personally going to do is they're going to defend the Janiculum and organize all the people leaving Rome. So all your plebs leaving Rome are first going to be sent to the Janiculum, and then from there, the Fabians are going to organize how they're going to scatter from here on out. The idea there being is we need to scatter in an organized way that we get you all the resources that you need. If all the plebs try taking one path, the first ones to go are going to gather up all the food and stuff, and there isn't going to be anything left for whoever follows that same path. So as we're scattering, we need to scatter in as organized a capacity as we can to gather up the resources around and get it to as many Romans as we can as we scatter everywhere we're going. So basically deplete the lands around Rome as much as we can, making sure those resources go to Romans. So that's what the Fabians are doing out on the Janiculum. The majority of Rome's population, they would go here, and the Fabians would tell them, take this path down to this city. So another one would go, and they say, take this path down to this city, whatever. And that's how it's kind of being organized. Everyone getting ready for the Gauls.
Sounds like they've been planning this for a long time.
Well, they had some time to think because of how the Gauls dragged their feet. So the Gauls, they don't even show up to Rome until it's sunset. When they show up to Rome, the gates are open with people coming and going. There's no men posted on the walls to protect the walls. It feels like a trap. So when they show up there once again at sunset, after expecting a trap, they say, maybe this is a trap. And they're trying to suck us into just charging into the city in some disorganized way at nightfall, and that's how they're somehow going to get us. So even through the night, the Gauls don't go into the city waiting to see if something's a trap. And in the morning, they're going to send scouting parties to see, is this really what it looks like? They're just leaving their city to us. This can't be real. These are the great Roman warriors. What's going on? So, that's pretty much what's all carried out. Everyone does their own separate duty. In the morning, the Gauls realize there is no trick. Everything's exactly as it seems. And they're just leaving their doors open to us. So the Gauls enter the city. They're still somewhat suspicious. And so what they do is, basically in the center of Rome, wherever the forum is, they keep an organized body of Gauls ready to fight while the rest go plundering throughout the city. Because what can happen in past battles is if the army starts instantly plundering, if an enemy army then enters a city, you're catching them completely off guard and you just kill plundering parties as they come up. So keep an army there in case some other army shows up some way, then you can go face them while we get organized again. Because there's still got to be some trap. It can't just be this simple. Now, poor Romans on the Citadel, they're up there watching the Gauls coming into their city and doing everything that they're going to do. Still have guards on the Citadel protecting the Citadel, but now Gauls have access to the rest of the city, just not the Capitoline Hill. The Gauls, they begin by plundering all the homes that are all barricaded up. Those are the natural ones. All the patricians who left their homes wide open, again, they're convinced that there has to be some sort of trick to this. And so they hold off plundering those homes, but they're plundering the other homes, and they're killing the plebs who tried hiding in those homes. But at the beginning, they leave these patricians alone. And these patricians sitting out like statues, is the way Livy says it, in front of their houses. And a long time goes by, several hours, before one Gaul goes up to one of the guys sitting in his chair and kind of leans in to look at him or something like that. And the patrician had like his rod or whatever by him and just knocked him upside the head. And with that, the Gaul killed him and then went into his house. And once they plundered one, they started plundering them all. And then it just becomes mass killing and looting of the city of Rome. So, everyone left behind, getting killed pretty much. Poor guys up on the Citadel wall watching. I mean, God, think about it. These are the people that they looked up to their entire lives. Mostly what they're going to see very clearly is the elderly patricians that they looked up to being killed in front of them. So they're infuriated by that, having to watch it all happen. What the Gauls do, though, while they're going through and they're doing all their plundering and they're doing all their killing, they intentionally don't burn down very many homes. And they don't burn down very many structures. They think that they can still somehow use those structures as a negotiating tactic with the Romans in the Citadel. So their hope is that they'll somehow be able to say, if you guys will surrender now, we won't do any more burning to the city, blah, blah, blah. So they try to use killing people to draw out the Romans from the Citadel. That doesn't work. They try to use, after that, they start using the homes themselves to try and draw them out. Saying, come out or we're going to set fire to this structure. The Romans don't come out, they set fire to it. Come out or we're going to set fire to this structure. The Romans don't, so they set fire to it. Something like that. Anyways, the Romans refuse to come out, and so the Gauls then just start burning down the whole city. Until pretty much everything that can be burned down is set afire and being burned down. And they still couldn't get these pesky Romans to come out of the Citadel with whatever food supplies that they had. Now the Gauls, since they couldn't bargain with them to get him to come out, got to get him to come out somehow, they decide the last option to him now is to force him out. And so the Gauls try actually attacking the Citadel. And when they go try to attack the Citadel, the Romans intentionally hold off, counterattacking for a little bit to draw as many Gauls towards them as they can. And they counterattack them with just a ton of ferocity and kill a bunch of Gauls. And the Gauls decide that's not worth it. And because so few men, so well defended, can inflict so many casualties against us, it's not worth us trying to take the Citadel. And so now they realize the only thing left for us to do is to starve them out. They can't have that much food up there in that Citadel, especially with how densely populated it is, with how many people they shoved into the Citadel. So the Gauls now are forced to basically besiege the Citadel and try and starve them out. Now the Gauls are in trouble because they just burned down the entire city. And now they got to try and starve out the people in the Citadel. When they were plundering and looting the city, they weren't worried about picking up loaves of bread. They were just looking for valuable items. And so they pretty much burned all the food in the city. And as they've been doing this, throughout the countryside around Rome, the citizens who left the city have kind of been gathering up whatever they could along the way. The Fabians kind of organized that. And so there isn't really access to food close to Rome either. And so the Gauls have got to besiege these guys. They don't have access to easy food right now. And the surrounding area doesn't really give them ease of access to food anymore. And if they want to get food, they're basically going to have to go outside of what is just controlled by Rome and basically harass neighboring cities to plunder their lands to get food to keep the siege at Rome going. And so what the Gauls have to do is split their army up into two armies. One army is now going to be responsible for going and raiding the countryside, maybe set up a bunch of raiding parties that go out their separate ways and raid. And one army to maintain the siege here against the Romans back at the Citadel. Okay, talked about all that. So now, one Gallic army in Rome maintaining the siege, one Gallic army in Rome trying to go about the surrounding land, gathering up whatever they can to continue feeding their army. Eventually, one of these raiding parties, significant size, don't know how many, probably a couple thousand men, they make their way into Ardea's land. Now, who's at Ardea? Camillus. Marcus Furius Camillus is at Ardea. And so these Gauls are coming into Ardea's territory. Ardea is very concerned by this, and so they have a public council trying to decide what should we do about Ardea. And so Camillus, he participates in this council, and he asks if it'd be okay if he went and gave his advice, and they say, yeah, go ahead, we'll listen to you. And he says to him basically, you guys have been very kind to me, and I have not had an opportunity to pay you back. There's one thing I'm good at, and that's leading armies. And so if you want, I will take the army that you have stationed here, and I will go deal with those Gauls. He says, I know what those Gauls are like. They are very big, strong, intimidating people. But as they plunder the land, they kind of just eat, they engorge themselves at night eating what it is that they plundered and drinking a ton at the end of the day. And he says on top of that, they do not set up camps like we set up camps. And they kind of haphazardly just set up how they sleep and go to sleep. So they eat a lot and drink a lot right before bed and then just sleep. He says, if you will give me control of your army, I promise you not a fight, but a slaughter. I will lead them out, at night, and we will go take him completely off guard, and we'll be able to kill this raiding party, no problem. People of Ardea say, that sounds pretty good. So when night falls, he takes a bunch of the Ardea guards. They go upon the Gaul camp. There they are, not really much in line in the way of defenses. They quickly kill a bunch of the Gauls. And a few that managed to escape ran on stupid routes to places where they'd already been, where the populace was mad at them for raiding the lands and get themselves killed that way. And so that whole raiding party gets largely swiped out. So there's Camillus' first success against the Gauls. Little raiding party there. Now back up in Veii, where the Roman army is. What on earth has been going on up there? Come back to our slide if I miss anything. But so back up here at Veii, Veii was just recently an Etruscan city. Everyone knows in Veii, or everyone knows in Etruria, about the Gauls going down and attacking Rome. So a bunch of southern Etrurians decide this is a good time to reestablish Veii as an Etruscan town. So those 20,000 soldiers that went to Veii, what they did is they put as their captain a centurion, elected him to be the head, but they were quickly being besieged by Etruscan armies. And so they were holding out in their own fight against the Etruscans. Inside of Veii. So they were defending Veii, and Veii actually was besieged by some Etruscans. And he led the army out. They broke the siege, sallied out, broke the siege, drove them back, and then went and found them in the field again and beat them in a decisive field victory somewhere out there, and then went back to Veii dealing with the Etruscan threat. But there was nothing they could really do with the Etruscan threat at their tail. So that's what had them tied up this whole time.
That's pretty good that they were there then.
Yeah, who knows? Could have led to a whole other crazy siege. So that is what was going on at Veii. And now, the captain there, after they deal with that attack, they get word about Camillus and what he had just done with the Gauls down south. And they find out, oh yeah, Camillus is still there in Ardea, and it sounds like he still has his wits about him. So, Caedicius, this is a centurion leading at Veii. Caedicius, a Roman centurion, led the forces at Veii, defended Veii from nearby Etruscans, said that. Oh, and on top of that, after he beats those armies, word gets out that Rome still has Veii. And so this is now becoming public information to the region. And so now Romans who have been scattered out throughout the area are now coming together and consolidating at Veii. On top of that, people, in particularly the Latins, who are being harassed by the Gauls, a bunch of volunteers from them are now also showing up at Veii to supplement their military force. So a bunch of troops and a bunch of Romans are showing up at Veii. And so now, Caedicius, the centurion at Veii, that's when he finally gets word of Camillus down south, and he's thinking to himself, I got this big army, there's my great general, put the two together, and we can help Rome. Only one problem. Camillus doesn't have any commanding power. He can't just lead an army. He has to be elected to a position or appointed dictator. That's the only way you can lead a Roman army. And the Romans, they follow the law. So you can't just have Camillus show up and lead the army. First, since we can't do an election, we got to get him appointed dictator. The problem is the entire Roman Senate is hanging out, all the living Roman senators are hanging out inside the Citadel. And so we got to get a message to the Citadel somehow inside of Rome. So how are we going to pull this off? And so some young youth says, I'm your man. I'll do it. I'll take the message to the Roman Senate and have them elect Camillus as dictator. And so some young kid sneaks up over the Roman walls into the city of Rome. And there's some cliffside on the Citadel. The Citadel is going to use the natural terrain that it has. It's not all just going to be built-up walls. There's some cliffside that's part of the wall that's very sheer. And so they don't bother guarding it too much, the Gauls. Not really a way to get in or out of the Citadel. So it's unguarded. He finds a pathway up it, and he sneaks up into the Citadel. He sneaks into the Citadel, lets them know that he's coming from Veii. That's where the army is. And on top of that, we have Camillus down south, and we need you guys to appoint him dictator. Well, first, they have to get the assembly together, and they have to, they decide to first appeal the decision to punish him in the first place, overturned that, and so now he's welcomed back into the city, because if you exile yourself to avoid a trial, it's understand that you can't just come back to the city. So they have to overturn that decision and actually have the people there vote on that and get that vote done, and then turn around and have the senators appoint him a dictator. So they cover out their logistics, and now he's appointed a dictator. Now we just need to let him know he's a dictator. And so the kid says, I'm your man. And so once again, he has to sneak down out of the Citadel and sneak his way back out of Rome. Now, we don't know if it was on his way in or on his way out, but the Gauls, some Gauls, I don't know how many, some Gauls saw what this kid did. Now, this wasn't too strange to him, because apparently there had been Romans kind of sneaking in and out of the Citadel to carry out religious practices in the city. You got to go do certain sacrifices at certain times in certain places. And the way Livy puts it is that the Gauls respected religious activities, and so they largely didn't interfere with that. And just kind of let it happen, I guess. So, but this kid, he snuck up and down and left the city. So this is different. Also, they notice the path that he took is one that they hadn't really considered before. And they start thinking to themselves, that's a pathway into the Citadel. We could probably use that. And so they decide that come the next night where there's enough moonlight, we're going to try sneaking up an army, sneaking up some men up that exact path that he took. And they can go open the gates to the Citadel, and this is all done. And so the next dark night, or the next night where there's enough moonlight that they can see by, they do just that, and they climb up this part of the cliff where this kid had gone up before him. And when they climb up the cliff, for some reason, the geese of Juno weren't where they were supposed to be. They were hanging out on the edge of this cliff. And so when the first guy came up the cliffside, he somehow hit one of the geese or something like that, made it squawk, whatever. And the other geese started squawking. And it woke up a nearby Roman. We have his name up here somewhere. Marcus Manlius, and then he's not Capitolinus yet. He's going to earn this right here. So Marcus Manlius, he gets woken up by the geese. He sees the Gaul there. He instantly runs and charges at him with the shield, knocks him off the cliff into the guy who was just coming up, and they tumble down, knocking a few guys down along the way, killing a few Gauls. Go ahead. Juno's who they just got from Veii. And so they built a temple for Juno somewhere in their citadel, and geese are her animal because geese are her animal. I don't know. Vultures, being Mars's birds, is the only one that appeals to my intuition.
Okay. Is she like the Roman version of Hera or something?
Yeah, that's. Yeah. I don't know at this time, but it's definitely the way that it goes in the long run, and it's definitely the way Livy would have rationalized it.
Okay.
But I think what ended up happening in history is that whoever this Juno is was actually the patron god of Veii, and ended up being merged with Hera from the Greek culture.
Oh,
but I don't know.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because we've already heard about Juno following poor Aeneas across the Mediterranean, making his life miserable as he was trying to get to Rome to set up. Going all the way back to the Iliad and the Aeneid. Anyways, that Juno, and that Juno's geese. So, the Gauls, they tried to do this attack. It didn't work. They ended up losing a few Gauls. Marcus Manlius just barely saved them from being completely destroyed. So he's awarded the surname Capitolinus for defending the Capitoline Hill. And so now he's Marcus Manlius Capitolinus. Oftentimes the Romans, they get these extra names based off of achievements that they have.
Does he pass that on to his kids then?
I think so,
Wow.
but I'm not positive. Because we've already seen a Capitolinus before. I don't think it got passed on. I don't think Cincinnati, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not positive either way, so I shouldn't say. I don't know. Anyway, so that plan didn't work out for the Gauls, and the Romans just avoided a huge disaster. And so the soldiers, they're so grateful for this. What they all do is they offer up a half a pound of food and a half a pound of pint of wine, half a pint of wine, to him as his reward for such a great achievement, which Livy says it sounds like nothing to us now, but in the dire circumstances that the Romans were, with how their food and wine supplies were dwindling down, this was actually a huge honor to award him with. And now, that place where the guy climbed up, there was supposed to be a soldier there on guard, making sure that no one came up that way. And so the soldier who fell asleep was thrown off where he was supposed to be guarding and killed for falling asleep on the job. But we got we got Camillus, now appointed dictator, and we got a kid on his way down to Ardea to tell him, hey, you're dictator now. And then he'll have to go all the way back up to Veii to get the troops before he can do anything. So it's going to be a while. And in that while, we're going to have food supplies dying down for both the Romans and the Gauls. So famine is taking a massive toll now on both of these guys. One of the historians, not Livy, but one of the other ones, reports that the Romans were so tired they could hardly hold their weapons while on guard. So, very dire situation, running out of food, both for them and for the Gauls, but things are even worse for the Gauls. Because the Gauls burned down all of Rome, there's ash everywhere and smoke everywhere. The Citadel walls are somewhat keeping that away from the Romans, so they don't have to deal with that. But these poor Gauls, every time, Livy says something like every time the wind blows, re-push the ash up into the air, and now it's a bunch of them are even suffocating to death, they can hardly breathe. Some of the Gauls are dying of suffocation. So you have your Gauls, they're starving, they're suffocating because of all the ash. On top of that, there's disease spreading amongst the Gauls from something.
Well, they're in new territory, yeah.
New territory, so yeah. And then on top of that, these poor Gauls don't have the skin for this Italian sun and this Italian heat. And so their poor skin is just burning, and they're also dying of heat stroke. So the Gauls are having an extremely rough time, but there's a lot more Gauls than there are Romans. Yeah, still a lot more Gauls than there are Romans, but the Gauls have, Romans, they just have to worry about starving to death. These poor Gauls, they're dying of lots of things. And so, there's the two situation, getting more dire for both of them, but the Roman situation more dire than the Gaul situation due to the numbers in place. The Romans, they hold out as long as they can, but they can't hold out any longer. They're going to literally all starve to death. And so they decide it's time to start treating with the Gauls. And so they start their negotiation with the Gauls demanding whatever the Gauls demand, and the Romans saying that's ridiculous. The Gauls try to say, your situation is so dire, this is not ridiculous. The Romans, pretending that they have more food than they have, even from up on their walls, throw some food at the Gauls, pretending that they have food to waste as a negotiating tactic, trying to drive down what it is that the Gauls are asking for. The Gauls eventually settle on the demand of 1,000 pounds of gold, and they'll leave the city. That will make it worth it to them. And so whoever's there inside the Roman Citadel, whoever's organizing it, the Senate or whoever, they agree to that. And so now they've got to start measuring out the gold that they're going to give Brennus. And it's not like they have 1,000 pounds of gold there, so they'll have to measure out other things and decide, this much silver is worth that much gold or whatever. It's going to be a whole process. While they're measuring out the different things, they're using some of the scales brought in by the Gauls to do the actual measuring. They notice that the scales have been tampered with, and that they're not calling a pound a pound. In other words, every 2 pounds of gold we're giving you, you're only counting it as 1.5 pounds of gold or whatever. And so Brennus, he's there overseeing the negotiations, and when the Romans figure out that this is happening, they say, this is ridiculous, we have to use fair scales. And to that, Brennus famously drew his sword on the side where they had the weights to add even more weight, saying, Veii victis, or woe to the vanquished. You'll pay whatever I tell you to pay. And so that gives you a sense for how the negotiations are going. The Gauls are definitely going to try to get well more than 1,000 pounds of gold out of it.
Who's Brennus?
Brennus, he is the leader of the Gauls.
Okay.
So the leader of the Gauls throws a sword on there saying, woe to the vanquished. Tipping the scales even more in his favor. Huh?
Tough.
Yeah, tough luck. Pay it, or we continue the fight. Well, as this process is going on, Camillus finally arrives with the army from Veii. And now he's ready to fight. He realizes that there's currently this truce in place, so he can enter the city and be part of the negotiations. He shows up and he sees what they're doing, And he tells Brennus, not a chance. You Romans, take this gold back in the Citadel. We're not paying him a dime. Brennus says, what are you doing? We already have an agreement. He says, you don't have a legal agreement. I am the dictator. They have no authority to act. All the authority to negotiate is with me. So you have to negotiate with me. And I'm telling you right now, there aren't going to be any negotiations. We're going to fight. We Romans, he has some particular line in here. Something to the effect of, yes, Romans will recover their lands with steel, not gold. So we're not going to pay you off. We're going to fight. And I got my army outside ready to go. So ready when you are, essentially, as he marches back out. Now, the Gauls are furious with this. All this negotiation, all this back and forth, everything they've been trying to do to get these guys out of the Citadel, and now there's an army outside that they got to go deal with. And so they come out of the city and they kind of just go fight the Romans, while Camillus had time to strategically position his men however he wanted to position his men. The way Livy puts it is, with rage rather than good judgment, the Gauls attack, and they attack very recklessly. And they are very easily defeated. These poor Gauls who are starving, who are sunburned, who are been having a hard time breathing the past few days, some of them sick. It is just a ridiculously easy victory for the Romans, and they hurry up and they beat them just like that. And when the Gauls are beaten, they rush away from the battlefield, retreat away from the battlefield. Camillus knows how these guys set up camp. And so he's just going to keep his army organized and slowly shadow them until they set their camp. They set their camp 8 miles out. When they set their camp, he attacks again. And pretty much kills every single one of them. And all the ones who managed to escape the attack, it's understood that all the Gauls were killed, that even those who escaped the attack, the nearby villages that they had to go by, when people saw just lone Gauls running through their lands, went after them and killed them for all the raiding that the Gauls had done.
Very distinguishable.
Yes, very distinguishable, knew who they were. And so this army of Brennus is lost to history. It's gone, along with Brennus. Completely annihilated. And so now we're all able to go back to Rome. Once they win that victory, word is said back to Veii. Hey, everyone at Veii, we're coming back to Rome. Everyone's coming back to Rome, and we're going to celebrate ourselves a nice big triumph for recovering Rome. And now everyone decides that they love Camillus. And so Camillus, he's held as Romulus and as the second founder of Rome for re-establishing the city. And that's where he gets that name. Now, once again, the tribunes, they're going to be pushing to go to Veii, harder than ever now. Look around us. It's all burnt down. There's never been a better reason to go to Veii than to go to Veii now, so we're going to instantly see that push come into play here. The senators, they're going to request that Camillus maintain the dictatorship until the end of the year. The reason that they're going to give him is that they want him to oversee the next elections. Typically, it's military tribunes who oversee the next elections, but the military tribunes are going to be the ones blamed for this disaster. They're going to be responsible for any military failures, and so it's seen as a way of humiliating them to not let them oversee the elections. Now, that's what the senators publicly say it's for. What it's really for is to stop any of this push to go to Veii stuff. Keep people at Rome for the rest of the year, at the very least. And so that is why Camillus is referred to as the second founder of Rome. Now, first thing he pushes for is the restoration of all the temples in the city. And he says, what we're going to instantly start paying for it with is this 1,000 pounds of gold of materials that you guys brought here. If you were willing to use this gold to pay off the Gauls, you're okay with it going to the Gauls, you better be okay with it going to the gods. And so first thing we're going to do, temple restoration, and we're going to have that money be what's largely funding all this. So all that money is now, in a sense, religious money, set apart for religious purposes. And the second thing he instantly does is he wants to set up some sort of hospitality agreements between Rome and the city of Carino in gratitude for what they just did, because they basically welcomed in all the Roman priests, like your Vestal Virgins, for example. They went to the city. All the artifacts, all the religious artifacts that they had, all went into the city, all the ones that could be hauled off with, and now they're all leaving that city and going back to Rome. And so they have done a big kindness for Rome now, and so Camillus wants to make sure that that gets recognized, and going forward we have good relationships with the city for it. So opening those types of relationships.
Cities, or is it different?
No, Carii is one of the 12 Etruscan cities.
Forget.
I should have shown it on the map once. That was dumb that I didn't. Because we haven't really mentioned it that much. Here it is.
Oh yeah.
So Veii, Carii, about right here is going to be Tarquinii. And so they often fight Tarquinii, and they often fight Veii.
Carii was. Were they the
Carii
ones
just
that-
happens to be, they don't really have conflicts with them for whatever reason. There's no real fighting between them.
So they're not the ones that had the bright idea to start raiding Rome. when-
Nope, that was the Tarquinii up here.
Yeah.
And the reason that they thought they could get away with it, well, one of the reasons is because the Romans would have to march through the lands of Carii to do that, which would be like almost declaring war on them. You don't just let an army march on through your land. They let their army march on through their land.
Well, that's a good example.
And so, yeah, it's kind of shocking how little conflict, maybe there's been conflicts that just aren't recorded, but nothing significant enough to be captured. And so they seem to be on relatively good terms for how close to Rome they are, being Etruscans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from here on out, Camillus wants to make sure that that is recognized and maintained. Now, after the army, or after the year ends, and so now it's a new year and we have people re-elected, the tribunes are now going to continue pushing for this whole let's move to Veii. Once Camillus is no longer dictator, so he can't just block the action. And they're going to try and put this as a law now actually going forward. Now, even though Camillus isn't a dictator anymore, he's definitely someone that the assembly is going to listen to now. And so he decides to go and address the assembly. And once again, it's going to be through basically religious and patriotic appeals that he's going to try and get the people to agree to stay.
That seems to be his whole thing.
Yes, he is a very pious man. Strict, pious, strong, moral character is the type of guy that he would be. Kind of in a Cincinnati vein. And what he explains, one of the things he explains is, for some of the religious stuff, he says, we didn't retake the city to get the few people in the Citadel. If we were out to protect Rome, the majority of Rome was already in Veii. We would have just abandoned the city if the city wasn't worth fighting and maintaining, worth fighting for. So here we came and we fought for the city and we saved the people at the Citadel, and for what? To say never mind? And so really it was all fighting for the few thousand people in the Citadel? Is that what all this fighting was for? And all this resisting was for? Or was it for Rome that we were fighting for and for preserving Rome? So on top of that, here, remember that the Capitoline Hill has a temple of Jupiter. He says, how often were you sitting here praying for Jupiter to preserve his home? And so here the gods are, they preserve you in times of war. Are you going to now turn around and in times of peace abandon those gods? The God gave you the victory. Are you going to punish the God and abandon him for it? He said, going forward, how would all the other gods view us? Jupiter gives us victory at Rome and we abandon him. How would any other god be justified in giving us a victory again? Remember, Apollo just gave us a victory at Veii. Jupiter now just gave us a victory here at Rome. What does it say going forward for the gods, for us, if we abandon, if we turn our back on the gods, just as they give us some sort of blessing, some sort of reward? We'd be doomed from here on out. You'd be dooming future generations to this impiety. Got some actual lines from him. We refuse to abandon the gods in defeat. Will we when they grant us victory? Sorry. Read the next line. So there's one of his actual lines. And then also a patriotic appeal. Remember that the Romans have already been here for how many years? Like 350-ish. And they have all sorts of landmarks of all the different places where all the different events have occurred. It says, are we going to abandon all this Roman history now because it's too inconvenient to rebuild? It's the easy thing in the moment. But think about the insult that is to our past generations, and the insult it would be to future generations. What would we do if Veii somehow got burned down? Would we then abandon that and move to Fidene? And if Fidene got burned down, would we then abandon that and move to Gabii? Are we, who are supposed to be the Roman people, the greatest people on earth, the only ones who are not to have a consistent home and to be jumping around as it's convenient from city to city? Give you one of the questions that he asks as he's talking to him. Does our love of country lie merely in the surface and in the timber of the houses? Or do we actually love the country that we're a part of? So it's religious appeals and patriotic appeals that he's driving into these guys' heads for, no, we need to stay at Rome and rebuild Rome. And then there's one more little omen. Some soldiers marching through the city, when they get to the forum, the centurion leading them says, standard bearer, stop here for now. And they take that as an omen that we're supposed to remain here. So that was the final omen to be shown to the public that, yes, everything's saying that the Romans should stay here and they should rebuild. And so the law is formally rejected. We're not going to move to Veii. Rome is going to mobilize all resources into rebuilding Rome. And so that's exactly what they do. Rome mobilizes everything towards this building project. Got to tear down, get rid of all the burned up homes, rebuild everything from scratch. It's going to be a huge work. All the public treasury, all the public funds that are available are going to go into just buying building materials. Anyone who wants it, you have access to it, as long as you're going to use it to build something here in Rome. All the surrounding materials, any timber, any stone, anything you see in the surrounding lands, it doesn't belong to anyone anymore. Take it, it's yours, if you're putting it towards building something here in Rome. So everything mobilized towards building in Rome. Now, Livy points out something funny, because now you have Romans all over Rome just rebuilding. And there's no overseeing architect. And so it's kind of just randomly being built by different people organizing with other different people. So he says this is why in our day, it's often the case that public sewer works go under private people's homes. They used to follow the street, but when this happened, people just rebuilt however they rebuilt. And so some of these sewer lines that used to go under public streets are now under people's homes. And so that's why, to make a joke out of it, someone has to show up and drill a hole through your kitchen to get and fix the pipe underneath. Because it's the only way to get access.
That's infuriating. They had a chance to finally build Rome right. They built it wrong.
Well, what's nuts is when Rome found cities, they follow their military camp.
Yeah.
They follow that exact outline for the entire city. It has its main street this way, its secondary street this way, and they organize how everything goes very grid-like. The city of Rome itself, big old mess. And to date, a bunch of that is largely preserved, and today it's largely a big old mess.
Yes.
This is this is a picture of a 3D model of people actually trying to reconstruct. Now this would go into the Empire time, but it wouldn't have changed much since then, of what the Rome actually looked like. And so you can see it's just a hot mess. Everything scattered, all sorts of roads. I mean, there's some consistency with whoever was building this part of the city, but then you got roads going this way, that one's going that way. It's a mess. And this is the reason it's largely a mess. They just suddenly all got to work building and lost all the organization that they had prior to that outside of what there would have been.
The Colosseum is actually right next to the hill where the whole thing started.
Yeah, the Capitoline Hill, I think, is this hill.
Yep.
If you can kind of see that elevation going up.
What's that thing right next to it?
This?
That's a racing.
That's the Circus Maximus. This goes all the way back to the first Tarquin Priscus. It's the one who first put that in. Put it into space and then structure evolved around the time. But yeah, so Rome being rebuilt as a big mess, but being rebuilt, and they're going to stay there, and everything is being organized towards this rebuilding effort. And the reason that it's largely, we can see how it is today, is because it is going to be another 800 years until a foreign army enters Rome again. So Rome was sacked, and it's going to be 800 years before it's ever sacked again, before a foreign army makes it inside the city walls. There will be tons of times where there's foreign armies on the Italian peninsula, right outside of Rome. They will not make it inside the gates of Rome. So this is why Rome is from here on out referred to as the Eternal City. Well, not from here on out, but eventually gets that name again. It's the city that never gets sacked. It's the city that always survives. So we're at Rome's low point, but it's all uphill from here. So we reached rock bottom for Rome. What time does that say?
8:49.
8:49. I'll make one more note and then we'll continue with the story after that. Last thing to note here is this fire destroyed a lot of records. And so that's why up until now, Livy has been trying to piece together whatever it was happening with the records that are extant. And so he makes a note in the book, if you're reading the book. He says from here on out, he says up until this point, due to how far in the past things have been and the scarcity of records that we have extant from this event of Rome being burnt down, I've had to piece together what I could, essentially that. But from here on out, we now have the actual record still extant. It's because Rome, from this time all the way down to Livy, isn't going to be sacked again. And so now the history, he says, is much more reliable, much more authentic, because it's now actual history, written down things that he had access to. We don't have what he had, but he had access to those primary resources. And so all the history from here on out becomes much more reliable. Up until now, have to kind of piece it together. So Romulus probably wasn't the son of Mars.
I don't know. It seemed pretty.
Okay, and so yeah, we'll pick it up with how Rome puts the pieces back together next time. Probably don't want to jump to that. We still got a bit more of Camillus' story going forward. So even though he's 60, I don't know, 2 at this point or something like that, still going to be important. Any final questions before next time?
During like World War II when they did carpet bombing, they say that the areas where that happened, the economy exploded. And because of new infrastructure and like new technology and new innovations, just because everything was new and people were in it, became a hub for economy growth. And I was curious if that type of thing happened here as well when they did a rebuild.
Hard to say because there's a huge difference. Capitalism. Capitalism enables a bunch of people to put forth capital into one place very quickly. Just to give you, say you were trying to set up a business prior to capitalism, and you need $10,000 to kick off the business. The only way for you to really get that money is to go to a bank and get a loan for $10,000. If the bank says no, that's kind of the end of it. And the bank doesn't have a lot of reason to give you any sort of risky loan because the payoff is, best case scenario, you pay them back the 15% interest or whatever they charge you. Worst case scenario, they lose all their money. With the advent of capitalism, the idea that you own what your capital produces, one thing that enabled to do is a bunch of small people, you can now get $100 from a bunch of small people rather than setting up some loan. And so it enabled capital to collect together one place very quickly to be used. And then the other thing that it enabled is now, my max payoff is no longer the interest on the loan. If you take your $10,000 business and you make it worth $100,000 now I 10 times my money rather than my 15% interest rate. And so now I own what comes out of that capital. And so with capitalism, you're able to get booms like that because wealth can be concentrated so quickly into these different projects rather than having to talk just a bank into the standard loan to do what it is you're trying to do. So I don't know how much of that comes into the picture, but capitalism is huge in the modernization of the world, being able to get resources there and get it there very quickly. That's why it's a big part of why things just don't change very quickly in history leading up to it. So capitalism and the Industrial Revolution definitely go very hand in hand. And I don't know how much to credit one or the other.
It's got to be somewhat refreshing that they can go through and build out their infrastructure and do it better than they used to do it.
I don't know if it's better infrastructure. I don't know if it's worse infrastructure. I don't know if it was just hurry up and piece together whatever it was there. There is a huge upgrade to Rome under the under the Principate, specifically Augustus Caesar. He famously says, I entered Rome, a city of wood, and left it a city of marble, or something like that. I entered it a city of brick and left it a city of marble. So a massive upgrade to the infrastructure under his time, for sure. For this, I have no idea. Sorry, that was a random detour. Any other questions? All right, well, till next time.